Hi, today is the October 22nd meeting of the LTAC committee. This is Jay Rosapepe.
Lorraine Olson with Mrs. Howe's Bed and Breakfast.
Kathy Garcia with the Port of Bremerton.
Keith Washington.
Jack Edwards of Days Inn.
Brandy Rainerson, City Clerk, City Staff.
Okay, so when we last met, we had taken a look at, Brandy had given us the information on funds that were current and the recommendation was to start at 100,000. We had talked, taken a look at that and wanted to use some of the funds that are still currently available, and we had come up with an ask of 125,000. We took that discussion to the City Council last week, and they basically rejected that, primarily on the idea of concern about what happens if funds do not come in, that we would be spending them ahead of time. And so they came back and said 100,000 with one caveat. We could go with 125, but then next year would only be 75,000. Because they're in the biennium budget, they're looking at 100,000 each time. So we can go ahead and say, nope, let's do 125 this time, or we can say, hey, we're going to do 100,000 and then do some reductions and see where we land up. Now, one of the other discussions that went on was to look at something that might be a one-time item. So if you were looking at where would you cut, or where would you, what would you, stay with, it was, for example, I'll just bring this up, as Fathom a Fund had a request for a new truck. So instead of saying you might want to leave them higher than somebody else, realizing that's a one-time expense that they were looking at funding, because they were looking at partially funding their truck. Did I capture that just pretty close? Anything you'd like to add, Brandy?
Just one more comment, that their bulk of their concern was setting up precedents with the organizations on that. If 125,000 is now, then the expectation that they're going to have more money next year and the continuing years. So that was the other concern that they had, is that are we setting up these nonprofits for not failure, but on the assumption that, hey, we're getting more and more and more each year, so they're gonna keep spending and spending and spending, and that was another mention.
And with the fact that we're not getting any more rooms, right now, that unless there's a tremendous increase in the cost of rooms, that really they don't see it going up more than the collections that they're budgeting at.
And at the meeting I was at for the tourism, Beck Ashby and the mayor also reiterated that they were worried that we're giving too much money to weekend events, one-time events, that whose mission was just to put on events.
And that was a concern. That's a good point you brought up. Thank you. So
could I
yeah,
just add a
go
little
for
bit
it.
too? I actually listened to the, it's really hard to listen to those YouTubes. There's like so much chatter going on, or is it delay or something? I don't think people are talking. Other people are talking, or?
Some of it's the equipment as well, especially if it's a work study style. It's hard to pick up the feedback, so hopefully next year we'll have somebody come in and analyze the IT system, the software, but.
Well, I didn't mean, but it was just
Yeah.
really hard to.
It is, you're not the only one.
Sometimes it comes in really clear and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that, and I know I look at things differently, and I'm always hopeful that sometime somebody will break the mold. It's sort of it's always a political thing, a politically okay thing to say, well, we're afraid we're going to set a precedent. And in this case, I feel that it was underestimating our nonprofits. That why not? One of the interesting discussions is there was not even a common knowledge what the reserve meant. One council person described it as an escrow account. It's not an escrow account. It is money that is sitting there that is not dedicated, that is a reserve. But it wasn't, if you would have been sitting there in the audience, or me who didn't know any better, I wouldn't even know what the definition was, because nobody said, you know, we need to stop here and let's create a common definition of what a reserve means for people like me, to set a record straight. I was just, I almost fell off my chair when I heard that. And then this whole idea of that, you know, we're setting a precedent. Well, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that concept, but there's another way to look at it. It's why not show good faith to the people, all our nonprofits that are working so hard to bring these events. The council could do that, but they fall into this pattern of not really, of just being status quo, I think. And it was disappointing to hear that conversation. And then I realized how important it is for us as a lodging tax committee to really be clear about why we do what we do, so that you have that information. And I didn't even think about it until I played back, and I thought, you know, Fred asked probably the best question of any council person. At least he asked a question, and it was, what was their justification for adding the $25,000? And I so wish that we would have taken more time to articulate that, because the real reason was that Visit Kitsap, and I think it was the chamber, asked for way more money than they've ever asked for before. They almost doubled their response, and we were trying to be responsive to that we felt that they were doing some really good work. Visit Kitsap was introducing the new nightlife idea. And I just, you know, I sat there and went, man, I think we missed a really good opportunity to at least, the council will probably never change, but at least we'd be on record as providing, I thought, a very valid justification for doing that. So anyway, it doesn't matter anymore, but for what it's worth.
Well, it doesn't matter, because you can go back and say, we're okay with what we did.
You can.
And put before.
If that's what the committee decides,
Will
it's
they
your choice.
approve it again?
No, they won't. They won't. And they'll do just exactly what Jay said. It'll almost be a penalty towards us because they'll take it away from us next year. The one point that I thought was a really good point that was raised, and this was raised probably 4 times. This is how well you guys don't listen to each other sometimes as a group.
It's fine.
4 times he said, we should really take a look at the reserve and what is our policy around the reserve. What can we and can't we do? Not that he was opposed to the extra $25,000, but we don't really have a clear policy, which in my mind was this golden opportunity to say, why not do it now? And then, because it'll take a year or more, even if you get back to it, because you have so many other important things that you need. You know, this is a very tiny, tiny part of the budget that they may not ever get back to, but I thought that was a really, really valid point. That would create a common definition of what the reserve is, so that all the council people, I mean, I'm not even sure some knew what they were voting on, because they thought the reserve wasn't really a reserve.
That's what I got when I attended the tourism meeting. Is that they didn't think there was a reserve. Because I said, isn't there a reserve? They said no.
And they can't not know that, because they've been talking about it ever since I've been on this committee.
So is that money just sitting there in like an escrow account, like you said, waiting in case of a
What is it used for?
Historically, it's just a fund balance, like a checking account. How I've been taught to use the funds. So every year I go and ask the treasurer for a projection of what the revenue is going to be, whatever that projection is going to be, that's what they allocate to spend. And so whatever the balance is what the balance is. So the $95,000 is the estimated fund balance of that account as of January 1st, out of all the allocations that are allocated this year, and they seek reimbursement for 100% of what they're allowed to, that will be the balance. That's what it is, and then they anticipate $100,000 coming in for revenue. That's how we've done it. Some council members weren't unaware that we spent more than what we have. They assumed that we're only allocating last year's revenue, not future revenue. So that was kind of not that I'm making excuses or anything, but that's my understanding of
There-
a take
Finish
on it.
that, yeah. And that was part of two other pieces of the comment. Was one is you're trying to spend money that hasn't come in yet.
And then how do you handle the cash flow? So if everybody
And the
spends
cash flow.
$100,000 right in January 1st, we wouldn't have it.
We would have, even though we know that the events are kind of, I mean, we know and they know, the events are a little bit more spread out over the calendar.
Right.
You know, with that. So, I mean, you can find reasons to do it and you can find reasons not to. I think that the council, and I'll speak for the council on this, was very adamant about that if we spend 125 next year, there will not be 100,000 there unless revenues come in
Higher than projected.
Higher than projected.
And my take is probably different than everybody's, but you were saying precedent. Well, if it's not really a precedent, but if you look at the history of the reserve for the last 5 years, according to the sheet there, it's been at 70,000. So the extra 25,000 we're spending, if it's at 95, it's just we're allocating extra funds that came in, and we're still keeping the reserve at what the reserve's historically been at 70,000, and we're just spending the extra surplus of reserve, whatever you want to call it, to help these organizations
This year.
this year. They can use a little bit more money for things that they've had, because based on what some of the stuff they were saying, I think some of their expenses have gone up, and what it's cost them to do their job that they do. So I have a hard time seeing why we can't do that, but I'll go with the majority.
I'm trying to learn, is there a surplus?
I think that
Does
goes
anyone-
back, I think that goes back to the comment,
That's what the
Lorraine's
reserve
comment
is.
about,
It's a surplus.
it's a common definition
Yeah,
of the
but when
reserve.
I asked Councilman Ashby that question, she said, no, there is no reserve.
That's because she doesn't really understand the concept.
She said there is no.
She didn't
she's-
realize that we were
uh,
projecting
well-
future income and not having, as she calls it, she's a recovered banker, and you don't spend money unless you have it. And
Right.
historically, this committee has spent future funds, if you will.
But we're talking about two different
That's what I
funds.
thought.
We have the reserve or the surplus fund. That's totally separate. And then then we have the projected funds. They are not the same, not the same.
They're two separate pots of money. They're two separate types of money, but they're all in one
Same
pot,
pot.
one account,
They are.
one
Okay.
Yeah, you
distribution.
can't, yeah, you can't
separate them.
You can't separate
You
them.
can't call it a reserve because it's all in the same account.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I've been told to call it a fund balance. It's the
So
fund
if it was-
balance.
so if it was two separate accounts, we
But it's-
didn't ask for that 25,000, would that still sit at the same amount all year?
No,
Is it used, what is
it's
it?
a fund balance. It's
What else
so
is it used for?
only lodging tax,
Lodging
Nothing. It
tax.
can only be used for lodging.
Okay.
reimbursement.
So, yeah, reimbursement, so if you're.
So
this is
income
low-
comes in.
Yeah, income comes in, expenses go out, it could go down, but at the end of the year, you would expect, actually they expect 95,000 in next year. At the end of the year, you'd probably see pretty close to the same fund balance.
Yeah. So you'd
So it's
have,
like a traditional checking account. You open the account, well, you received $95,000 in revenue all last year. So you start the 95,000, and then each month we get a trickle from the state. And so this month it's gonna be 1,000, next month it's gonna be 1,000 and $2. And so you keep going, and then, Fallon's put in a reimbursement, so you tracked it from the balance of the,
So there's no.
I don't know if that's the terminology,
There's no-
but that's how I
there's no
can
cushion.
envision
What?
it.
Is there a cushion in there?
Well, in essence.
That's-
that's the cushion.
95,000?
That's
It
the
depends-
cushion.
It depends on how you look at it.
Okay.
Okay? And, I'm taking this back loud and clear about this, okay? And again, as Beck says, I love the recovery banker analogy, is like, she's looking at it as saying, hey, we got 75,000 right now, and we might not get more than 20,000 coming in. There's no guarantee that we're gonna get that 95,000 in. So you're spending money you don't have in that, which, from my perspective, I'm speaking for myself, then why are we allocating more than 75? It's a balancing act, and I think there's a little bit of paranoia that the economy is plateauing, not going down, but they don't, like I said, they'd rather, this is me talking now for the council, not the council talking, they would rather be consistent in the funds that they give the nonprofits than we're funding you at this level and next year this level. So you have a decision to make.
So I just want to add one more to this conversation, and I started to say that this whole idea of the fear of setting a precedence, the fear of maybe not having enough money, which has really never happened, but there's always the what ifs. But it's underestimating our nonprofits, because if of anybody, they understand funding shifts. They understand if something catastrophic were to happen, that they know that we would sit down and talk with them all and there'd be a limit as to what they can spend down. That if none of them are adverse to or don't know what it's like to be in some point where there just isn't enough funding to get them through the year. So I think in my little happy world is that by showing good faith, and this is for the record more than anything, Jay, I'm not trying to run
I'm
a point
fine.
in the ground or anything.
No,
But,
it's okay.
but the point is that if we were to use this $25,000 that is in a reserve, that hasn't been touched in years, that doesn't lower the reserve anywhere than it has been for the last 6 or 7 or 10 years, and do that good faith effort, and with I don't know if it's in our contract or not, but people know that if there's a change, we're partners. The city is partners with us, and we sit down together and we talk about we only have this amount of money. Like that's the way I look at it. And that's
Would you like to make a motion?
It is in the contract. It is in their contract. that
no,
it is.
because
No.
city council, they just won't budge. I
Well,
know that, and it's
well-
just a waste of time.
Well, I understand that, but you all have the power. I'm non-voting. I'm a facilitator. You guys have the power to say, hey, we want to go in with 125. The council said it'll be 75, but that does, for the following year, but that doesn't mean that can't be revisited either.
That was gonna be my next question. Could that be
Sure.
revisited if we?
Anything can be revisited. I mean, in all seriousness, anything. You would see in the next budget, because it's a biennium budget, this amount for this coming year, 75 for the following year, but then you have a different argument depending on what happens with the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, on that side. That's why I said, if you'd like to make a motion, please do. It's a committee of 4.
No, I would.
Then otherwise, I've given you a target from that. Does anybody want to go down that route?
A question, because we know that you guys' budget is biannual. You're allowed to revisit the budget, and I mean,
Oh, yeah.
not just lodging tax, but you're allowed to revisit the entire budget, even though, in a year, next year anyway.
It's a budget amendment.
It's right.
It's
Yeah,
just
you can make
required
amendments
budget
to-
amendment that goes
right.
before
I'm
the
just saying,
council.
they've
Yes.
gone from an annual budget to
Yeah.
biennial budget starting
they'll
next
review it
year.
biennial.
So I just wanted to let you know that. That's not
Right, but yeah,
it's
you
not a
guys
big
are,
deal.
when you're looking at the finances and the revenues, you're allowed to make adjustments or amendments to.
Sure.
As voted on.
Happens all the time.
By council.
Happens all the time.
So, gives us a lot to think about.
But I appreciate your comments, because I think these organizations do work really hard to come up with new ideas, the nightlife and some of the different things that they're doing. And it'd be kind of nice to see what they could do with a little extra money and what they can bring in, and maybe we'd see a return on that effort. So I appreciate your thoughts and comments on that, and I agree with you. But I don't know that I'm willing to risk next year's 25,000, on making that decision of keeping it. I think that's a big risk,
I agree.
so.
So I'm hearing that we would take a look at reducing to get to the 100,000, unless somebody would like to propose a motion. Otherwise, because you can always vote on yes, no, and go from there.
Is it off the table to go down to the 100 with the option to revisit should more money come in?
I think
And-
that's a
and-
recommendation.
And,
that-
you know,
Sure.
and to maybe go back up to the 125 should more money come in than,
I could champion
is
that.
anticipated,
You know, I feel
perhaps?
that it could be revisited in June.
Would
as a
they call
recommendation.
this committee back together for that, if that was the case?
Yeah, we could do that. We could plan that meeting now.
Because I was kind of thinking if, as a compromise type thing, do the 125,000 with the understanding, you know, they're saying go down to 75,000 next year. I'm thinking, can we do the 125,000, and if the city makes their 95,000, then we don't get the penalty next year. You know what I'm saying? If we meet the project, and then why do we need to go to 75? We can, you know, not get that penalty for next year if we actually meet it. And then if we don't meet it, okay, then impose a penalty commensurate to what we don't make. You know, say we only make 90,000. Okay, so take 5,000 away from this next year from what we didn't make into that.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I
Yeah.
think, you know, again, you know, we're looking at next year, so we kind of have to look at it. I agree with
Right,
everything
yeah.
you say, and I agree with championing. I agree that we should look at it at mid-year and mid-budget, which are two separate animals. One's 6 months, one's a year out when we meet. I don't have any problem with that. The question is, where do you want to start today?
Yeah.
And like I said, you can start at the 125, or you can start at 100,000, or you can start somewhere in between.
You're the facilitator, so we have to look to you, what you think council,
The chair can,
But
so the chair can call this committee together at any time. It's his purview. And he could,
with pizza next time.
Yeah, really.
ask the council to relook at the funds, right? That's his role. So you could even, and this is a little bit of both here, is that you could provide the recommendation of the 100,000, right? And then say that in March or June, you want to revisit, and you've already made your 125,000 allocation, so you wouldn't have to redo the number. So you're gonna come up from this point that says, if revenues come in as higher than projected, then we want to allocate the additional 3,000 to this one, 5,000 to this one, so that way, whatever that 25,000, you have already got it set, your money's coming in, and then it's good to go. If it only comes up to 10,000 versus that 25, then you could either leave it be or reconvene for the additional 25. But
I have a question on that
Mhm.
one, and I'll ask this of the committee. Is if you were doing your budget, would you rather know it all up front or 6 months down the
Right.
road? You know, say, oh, we could pick up another 5,000, and then you would say, I really can't do anything with it right now because I budgeted that money would have been used back in March or April.
and most of the
after
marketing is
that.
all spent at the beginning of the year, and if they're gonna do it, they're gonna do it at
And
the
what
beginning.
about those events that
Yeah.
have already passed and didn't
Yeah.
have a chance that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not fair
Well, I'm
either.
just
So-
asking.
You're right,
You'd
you're
rather see
right,
it, so-
absolutely.
No, I think that's a really good
Yeah.
question, Jay, and
That is a good question.
and along those same lines,
Mhm.
I was thinking that, is this a calendar year for the
Yes.
lodging tax? So they don't start counting until January. So by March or April or May, that's only one quarter. And so it's, how
Because
could
they're
they,
2 months behind.
how could they even predict
Right.
that at that time? It probably, realistically, wouldn't be until fall, I don't think, before you really know.
Yeah, because we're looking at June numbers right now, I think June and July, if I remember right.
Something like that, yeah.
But it does give you historical perspective. I mean, more than just looking at that in, what month are we in? October, September, October timeframe is, saying, hey, can we come back and take a look? There's nothing wrong that stops you from doing that because we'll have better, we'll have more data that's trends. I mean,
But I just don't think the council would, they'd look at it, but I don't think they would do any they wouldn't take a risk. They wouldn't say, okay, we're a little ahead, we're gonna give it to these guys. I just don't see them doing that.
Even
Jay,
if they
that's not their history.
Even if they are educated on what the surplus is? No.
I'm sorry. I don't understand.
I was really discouraged. I just don't, you got your work cut out for you, I think, Jay. I know you tried really hard.
No, I mean, it's, you know, it's unfortunately being a new guy on the block. But every meeting, you know, I feel better about what the role is and what to do, you know, what to do.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so.
Well, you're doing the best you can, I
You know, I
know.
have a question for you. So, the 100,000 projected comes in, and the $100,000 is spent. What's left in the fund?
95.
95,000.
Okay.
See?
Is that what
Actually-
the council understands?
Or actually whatever wasn't reimbursed.
Not everybody.
Minus
Gotcha.
5,000, because we're
So there is
projecting,
a
we're
reserve
projecting that.
fish thing that's not being spent, that should be spent.
You just have to use the right word.
That money needs to be spent.
Well, okay, so I'll play devil advocate for a minute. You know, whatever happens, happens in November 6th. And, you know, just the stock market tanks, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, building comes to a, you know, screeching halt, et cetera. And instead of collecting 95, they only collect 50. You know, nobody's forecasting that. I'm just being really a naysayer. So we promised 100,000. We're only bringing in 50 plus that 75 that's sitting there, and that's 125. What's left at the end of the year?
That's a huge what if, though.
I know that, and
Really
but I'm
huge.
saying is people right now, we are victims of living in the past, and we're living in 2008, and it's 2018. And that's why what I'm saying is, if you guys want to revisit it, I'm fine. I'm fine with championing it. We may look at next year and say that, you know, hey, it's no more than 75,000, because that's all, you know, they're going to be firm on it this year because we went 125. How do you want to spread it, or do you want to fight the good fight next year with some education, watching the balance go up a little bit more and say, stop the madness, you know? It's a balancing act. You could go ahead right now and say, hey, let's take a little small bite of the apple and do 110. Nothing stops you, you know, reducing that. And then when, you know, if the balance comes in, you know, a little bit higher and stuff like that, say, see, we told you so, but things were there, we want to revisit this for next year and, you know, stay at the 100,000 mark. We're 110, but there was some extraordinary cost, and we've gotten a bang for our buck. So I'm trying to say is, you know, it's okay to go just a little bit further and fight, and let's see what the good fight has in it. You got 3 new members, you're, you know, and a new member, and, you know, so what would you think?
I don't know. I would defer to the others. We're all equals here at the
We
table.
are.
And
I'm just saying is, how are you feeling?
Seemed like pretty strong marching orders, the way it was first presented, that it's 100,000. So that's kind of the feel, the vibe that I got, was maybe that's what we should try to work on. And then say, okay, we did our homework, we went back and did the 100, but maybe we can include our comment that,
Absolutely.
you know, in the future, maybe we can look outside the box a little bit and look at some of the circumstances and things. I mean, it doesn't mean just because we go down to the 100,000, we don't have a voice that we can say,
exactly.
hey, you know.
Well said. Well said.
Okay. So I don't know, that's where I'd say, let's start whittling down. Unless you guys want to take it back, maybe that's what we have to decide. Do we all want to whittle down, or do we want to?
Just keep in mind, we're just an advisory committee. We advise.
That's
What we
right.
say isn't gospel. What we say isn't gospel, and they have to take it.
No, but they, you know, they, like I said, you know, they were willing to do the 125 with the realization it could be 75 next year.
But I thought we came to that term, it was okay.
Say again?
I thought we came to the realization that that might happen. That could happen. It might be 75 next year.
Right, what I'm saying is if you wanted to do the 125 this year, that's what I'm saying. So that's a choice you guys have to make.
And you take the chance, you might have less applicants last year, you might have more. Ask with a bigger ask. So,
Or you do the 125 this year and take a chance that they'll be willing to revisit that 75 number for next year, if the surplus
Yeah.
actually makes up where they're.
Then if they have the 75 next year, and that surplus is sitting pretty,
Who knows?
right?
Yeah, and that's something, that's why I wrote over there, common definition of reserve surplus, I think is something to be talking about, but it's not gonna be resolved here.
And then maybe
Going
add,
into this.
that can only be spent on lodging tax expenses.
Mhm.
I
That's-
think because I heard in the meeting that maybe could be used for other things, somebody suggested that, that maybe we could use this money for other things. Now, I don't know what they meant, but again, it's not clear to the citizens, and because of my experience, you may want to just clarify that that's just lodging tax money.
In anything that's, funds that are left over out of allocation has to be, before it can be expended, has to be brought before the committee before it can be expended. So the city can't dip into it anytime. The city can put an application, they have to put in an application just like anybody else does. So that balance is the balance, and before it can be spent, you as a whole will come back and provide a recommendation to the council, so.
You guys are a
Whatever
very
that's worth.
thoughtful group. No, seriously, it's, on that end of it,
So Brenda, you just made me think of something else, and this is very educational, so I really appreciate Jay letting us have this extra time. But you just mentioned something that made me think, is the surplus because each year we didn't give that out to the nonprofits?
So it's a combination of increased revenue that was received that we didn't account for, and it's also a mix of allocations that were allocated but did not seek reimbursement for whatever reason.
So the extra that's left over.
A couple of, not a
That's a
bulk of it,
combo.
but a handful of that is chimes and lights, because as the years progressed, I didn't seek reimbursement because it tends to be more of a local event and not a tourist event, so that kind of added to a little bit of it. And then there's other ones that, came in, for whatever reason, they
Hasn't
didn't.
even on there.
Right,
Or-
yeah, we didn't even apply for it, I think, last year, and then also this year. Foot Ferry came in under than what's expected, so over the years, so that's contributed to it. And then most of the nonprofits, they expend every penny that they get. There's a handful that, only have $50 left
The
over.
nickels and dimes have added up to dollars.
Correct.
So I don't mean to be blunt here, but it almost feels like a little bit of misaccountability. And the reason I say that is this money is intended to go out to our nonprofits to help them. And we've been hoarding that excess. And I understand wanting to be a balance. I mean, this started off small and it grew, and then it was $75,000 for a few years, and now it just keeps growing. And it feels a little bit dishonest that we're keeping this money that was really intended to go out to nonprofits, and there's no oversight or management of that, or no policy about, back to John's comment about having this be a reserve. I think we have input into any policy. I feel really awful right now that we're sort of hiding or hoarding this money that really was intended. The whole lodging tax process is intended to go out to our nonprofits. And I know that's being a little blunt, but that's how I feel.
Well, I'll go back to facilitating of where we are right now. So you all have a decision to make. Do you want to stay with the 125? Do you want to lower it to a different amount? Or do you want to, you've heard from the council that they would prefer doing 100,000, and with the proviso that it could be 75 next year. So I'm throwing that out, and you all have to make a decision
So
on that
in
side.
years past, there was times when Bremerton did actually have money left over at the end of this. There were some organizations they didn't fund. Some they cut down, and there was one, I think one year was a surplus 15,000. They said, hey, we're gonna hold it over and we're add it to next year. But when I was with the county says, going back to our point, these funds came in, we don't never want to see a surplus, we need to spend these. And if the projections for next year come in less, then they come in less. So, and I think she's right, that money's there to be spent.
I think it's a great point.
I don't think I would ever go down to 0 personally because of being 2 months behind in collection.
Understanding how it was with the
This is,
DOR.
different philosophical argument right now. I'm trying to get back to the tax at hand, the task at hand, not tax at hand.
Is there a written policy about that money?
No,
No.
No?
But there might be very shortly.
I'm thinking there's an opportunity here.
There's kind of a law too about spending that money on, not that there's a timeline on it.
There's
but
not a timeline
but it's-
on it.
There's nothing that says it has to sit in an account and not be used.
Well, that's a
Is there
separate,
something in
that's
the
a
RCWs
separate
about how
issue.
they're not being spent?
Not that I
So-
No.
am aware of.
So if I hear you right though, that 75 for next year is not set in stone, correct?
No, I'm not,
Correct.
I think that let me say how, I love being on record all the time. I think what the saying is, that's how we're gonna budget it for next year.
Right.
And so nobody said we can't look at it, nobody says that we can't come back and revisit it. It says, if you do this, this is what
This
we're
may
going,
happen,
this
or
is
this-
what we're gonna budget for that end of it. Like I said, if it comes in at 95 or over 95, then you sit there and you go, hey, look, we told you so,
Yeah.
and go from there. But, it's one of those ones, I think it's, Lorraine's made the argument many times here tonight, you don't have to stay with president. We can go forward and say this is where we'd like to stand. But that, again, is your decision.
When does council have to approve by? What's their deadline?
I think-
They'll approve it through the budget process, which I believe is slated for December
Oh,
11th.
okay.
Yeah, so whatever recommendation you bring
It's
to the
45
council,
days,
they
is it?
can, yeah, we've already started that
Yeah, 45
45-day
days,
process.
okay.
So whatever you guys bring back, they can take action on. They don't have to remand it back, they can just take action on what they feel.
Wonder how scary that's gonna be for the not-for-profits if we do the 125, stick to our guns, and then they see 75 in the budget next time around and go, oh dear, And I just don't know what kind of I just think it's scary to put that out there to them, It's 143,000 an ask, and you're saying only 75 may get funded, I don't know.
But the nonprofits don't see that number.
No, okay, I guess they don't.
They don't know what they're asking for.
Yeah, they only know they're asking what we allow, yeah.
But they all are so closely knit.
And some of them do pictures. They always call the office. What's it look like? How much is going to be there this year? How much is going to be
This is all public records. I mean, it's in
Yeah, no
minutes and
secrets.
stuff, so
Yeah.
anybody else can look at the same
Yeah.
time. So-
I'm just making a comment.
Sure, I'm okay with going forward, but then council can start picking and choosing off it, couldn't they? So,
Yep.
Yeah, then they can make their own choice.
But I know council was really strongly trying to figure out which organizations were actually, putting the heads in the beds. That was one of their comments. So they might start picking out what they think is the ones just bringing in locals.
Well, it's not, I think it's been clear that there is no clarity in who's coming in, who's spending the night for this event, and so.
That's right.
I mean, you can't do it by cell phones anymore. My God, I was talking to somebody local. They had a Florida area code.
Oh, yeah.
And lives here.
And lives here.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Oh my gosh, that happens
Yeah.
all the time to me.
Well, I'll just, I guess, start. I think we should, what I think is go down to the 100 with a recommendation that if it comes in more, take the extra, the 25, and allocate it. I don't know. Just to get something rolling.
To revisit in June. then.
Exactly. But to go to the 100.
And I have your other comments over here. So, I mean,
I don't know.
those would be things that I'll address with the council and the mayor.
I like your emotion. I would I'm uncomfortable about that, the second part of it about revisiting in June, because of Jay's point, that I thought it was a really good one. It makes it really hard for, I mean, but I love the idea of giving them more
I do
money,
too.
but I don't know how effectively we would do that, because
And
I think you
fairly.
even raised the really good
Yeah.
points that things happen at different times
Yeah,
of the
that's
year.
true.
You'd have to allocate it for 2020, more money in 2020 versus,
So then that kind of puts it either do the
You flip
100 or
it.
stick to our
Mhm.
guns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say go down to the 100. I don't know. What do you say?
I'd like to see it stay at 125 and then revisit the 75 next year if it makes the thing, basically take the chance that we're gonna make it and then revisit the 75 and try and get that 75 upped next year, you know. But that's just me,
Well,
that's money.
yeah, that's out there now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with that too. I don't think it's gonna hurt the reserve fund.
Doesn't sound like they're gonna touch the reserve fund. That's the whole point.
I love that you feel that way, and thank you so much. And my only thing is I am so pessimistic now, and the other thing that I feel like, I don't know, I just feel this responsibility that I'm here representing nonprofit organizations, and they are our partners, and I feel that if we're making a decision that could cut into their funding next year, they should be a part of that decision with us. And so it feels really, that would be the only reason I would vote against the 125,000 right now, because now the council is sort of imposing a penalty on us of $25,000 next year. And I don't feel right in making that decision without the nonprofit partners. If they're willing to take that risk, I'm not willing to make that decision for them.
That's kind of where I was coming from as well, when I
That's
said,
my
how are they gonna
only-
feel when they see?
Only thing
Yeah,
here.
I agree. It's like we're gambling
Well-
with
We've
their
got 2
money.
and 2 here.
It's like we're gambling with their money, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me look at it a different way.
I don't look at it as it's their money, because I'm the taxpayer, so I look at it as my money.
I get it, but it's sitting there in a surplus.
These aren't gifts. These
Yeah.
are, the whole purpose of lodging tax is to create marketing strategies and plans that are gonna increase our hotel revenues.
and they do have a year and a half
And more
advance
lodging.
notice that if the funds don't, get expended or used to help promote, then that revenue for next year isn't gonna come in. So you can use the money now with the understanding that it may not come in and you're gonna have to cut some.
Because if you look at the
Expenses.
numbers up there and what we've cut already, we took some pretty good hunks out of some of those already.
And then, you might go in that saying, hey, gee, I only get 80% of what I asked for, so therefore if I ask for more, I'll get 80% of what I'm asking for to increase. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but
Well,
I've
we've looked
been on that side before.
And we've looked at past, from this city too, there's been years where organizations got 0. This is the first time I've ever seen actually anyone everyone who asks gets something.
Yep.
That's rare.
Yep.
We don't have to be nice. It's business.
But I think everybody felt strongly about all the ask, the groups that were asking. I thought that was well thought out,
It was captured well too, might I add, since I wasn't here for that, and I read the notes, so it was captured well, thank you.
Yeah, you did.
I didn't wanna
You did
give
very
the-
good job. No, you did a good job. You guys did the
Sorry
very
it took
best you
so long to
could.
get 'em out, but-
No, it was good, it was helpful to me, so thank you.
We could be of more help. We could provide more clarity, I think.
So, let me throw something else out at you, looking at it a different way, okay? And this would be kind of a negative, and I'm not trying to sway anybody, I'm just saying, this is another way of looking at it. So, this year, we're at 125, and the following year, for whatever reason, it's 75. Then your difference is 50. That's a hell of a chunk, and I think that's what you were talking about, concern. On the other hand, you say, hey, we do 100 with the proviso, hey, we want this looked at going in there, in other words, all this definition, and we want a little bit more clarity and a little bit more transparency, I'll use that word, it's overused, but I'll use it anyway, into this, so when we come back, we have a better idea about that. In other words, putting down on paper what our task is and why there's a reserve surplus, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, you guys have given me some homework to do with the council, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, on that side.
You're a really good guy, Jay. You really are. You're great to work with.
So I think it kind of comes to, if which one would you feel more, which scenario would you feel more comfortable with? And I'm not, by the way, I'm not stuck on 125, you could say 110. Just realizing whatever you do here has an impact over, a possible impact over there, but at least, on the budget side. Here, it's like, it'll be in the budget 100, but you're saying, hey, we want to really see how we can look at that and have some more clarity about that. You gonna help me out here, or you gonna leave me hanging?
No, I think
She
you
just
explained
enjoyed it.
You explained it perfectly.
Okay, don't feel the need to translate. This made
No,
sense. Okay,
it made
thank
sense
you.
to me.
I thought that was really
Yeah.
well said.
Mhm.
So,
I've always been the optimist. I like the 125 and take a chance on next year. Because I honestly think we'll make the 95 or whatever. But I'm an optimist, so that's just my way of thinking.
The other option is if the committee's interested in moving forward with the 125,000 they want to seek the input of the nonprofits, I could send out an email that says, would you rather?
Oh, that's
And
so
then-
much more work.
I know,
Yeah.
but I
That's so
mean,
sweet of you to
and then if
offer.
they say no, they rather have it even spread, then the committee can reconvene and doodle it down. Or if they say no, we understand, we want the money now and we'll deal with it later. And then, because this isn't going to go back before the council until the first meeting of November, so we have time.
first meeting November, December,
November.
November, that's right around the corner.
It is.
Sorry.
Well,
no,
it's the 11th or 13th,
It's the
yeah.
13th, I'm sorry, I was thinking of the 6th.
I mean,
It'll be here soon.
Yeah.
That's so
So
sweet of you.
if you wanted the
Randy.
input of the nonprofits, I don't know if that's going to help or not.
If I promise pizza, in all seriousness, I mean, it's a big decision, you guys, and you
It
guys
is.
are looking at it, and you're being very thoughtful about it. I promise pizza, can we, could Brandy send it out? We only have 8 nonprofits up here, or, 8, because.
And you're really only going to
I
ask 6 because
And
2 of them are the
6, yeah.
same and one's the city.
So, yeah, so, it gives us some feedback, we'd have to meet again, but, I'm willing to do the pizza, I'm serious.
Just kick it back.
I think I would feel better
Come back in
if
a
I
couple weeks.
knew if the not-for-profits were willing to take that
Yeah.
gamble.
If they want it now,
Yeah.
with the understanding that it's going to be
Yeah, I
significantly
think
lower.
that would
Could we-
alleviate some of my
Yeah, could we do November 5th?
concern.
Because that gives us a whole week.
Yeah.
That's another Monday, is that a good day?
And I'd really like to see the council, as we talk about, really educated on this balance fund, because I think that they're not entirely
Well, I think
on the
what's-
same page.
I
They're not.
honestly believe what's going to convolute things is that you have 2 different treasurers, and so you have a new treasurer this year, and so
Well, I
he has
mean,
one opinion, and then the previous treasurer had another opinion, so that could be some of the conflict. But again, it's whatever the treasurer is going to believe that he believes that statement is what he's going to present to the
But-
council, and that's what the council's going
and
to.
I will meet with, I have a meeting with
That's
the
the
treasurer
confusion.
on Wednesday about the overall budget, and I'll be more than glad to champion this.
So would there be a chance that if council understood it better, that they may reconsider the 125?
I don't think for this,
No,
well,
not for
let
this year.
me back up a minute. They'll consider the 125
With the,
with the 75,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean we can't come back and it allows the leadway. The real question is I think what Randy's asking, if she goes out to them and say, this is a possibility, would you rather have the 100, 100% guaranteed, or would you rather do 125, possibly 75, but it could be more. It could be 100,000,
You just don't know them.
We won't know. We know it's gonna be 75, but, at a minimum. But it could be more.
And that would be, that's, you explained it in a really good way, but what's behind that is this $95,000. So even if we're taking, it just seems so silly to me that the council would take the $75 or $25,000 and use it as a penalty rather than, I don't know.
But they're not looking at it as a penalty. They're
But
looking at
that's what it feels
this is
like.
I understand it. And they look at it as projected revenue over a 2-year period of 200,000.
But they still have all this money in there, though.
They
the
still have
reserve.
a fund that's a current balance fund. And again, the comment was made, can't spend money that you don't have in hand. The answer to that one would be, then why do you spend more than 75,000?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so that's something I have to work on. I think right now, from what I'm hearing, is we're kind of circular logic right now. And I mean, seriously, if you guys don't mind another hour and a half on November 5th, just because Monday sounds like a good day, then my thing would be, let's ask the nonprofit. I got a meeting with the treasurer and the mayor on Wednesday to kind of put out this case and say, this is what we can do. And then we have more information when we come back, and then we know that we really do have a decision to make. And we may not have 100% clarity, but we'll have a little bit more information, which it may help with that. That would be, I'm putting that out to the committee.
I'd be okay with that.
I'm free.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Plus, it gives them more information. Gives them more information on their side to work with too, because they're getting more information, a better idea of what's going on.
Yes.
I would say that when I said this, and I'm sure Brandy, when you talked the next day, I felt it was a knee-jerk reaction of no. And as opposed to a little bit more, let's think about this for a minute, okay? So I don't think there's a reason. Let's put it this way. If nothing else, we haven't lost anything. We've just had a good discussion, and you guys have given me some homework for my next year in office.
And we'll have the input from the nonprofits.
Yes,
right,
the
which
input
would
from
really be
nonprofit.
nice.
Which I think is
I
a
think
really
so.
good thing to do. Nice job,
Yeah.
Randy. Yeah, nice job. Okay. Yeah. Is everybody free on the 5th right now?
I honestly don't know. I'll
I
just
know.
have to play it by ear.
Yeah.
Again, I'm retired, so.
Yeah. So right now, we'll do the 5th on
5 o'clock.
Yep.
Pizza and Mike will be good.
I'm just here for the pizza.
Yeah.
Happy with pizza.
I'll make time for the pizza.
There you go. Okay. Good. Thank you all. It was an excellent discussion. I like the clarity.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
the meeting's
It
ended
really
at,
was a good
whatever time
discussion.
it is.
Thank you.